Welcome everyone to the fourth lecture that the HMCT in graphic design has on space. I'm Gloria Kondrup and I'm the executive director of the Huffman Smoken Center for Typography. I want to thank the graphic design department and especially our teaching assistant for the lecture series who designed all of the identity, Alan, who's here to say hello. Alan Zhu, a graphic design student. Thank you, Alan, for doing all of this. Yeah. It's been an interesting series, and we have another interesting speaker today, and I'm going to let Professor Ty Drake, the director of the graphic design spatial, grad spatial department. It's a new area that we're developing, and I think part of what we're doing here with these lectures is to kind of introduce to the students and to other people who are interested in the importance of space on and off the page. And Ty, or I'll let him introduce Kenny, will be taking the stage. So thank you everyone for attending, and perhaps I'll see you at the end of the lecture. And Kenny, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Truly appreciate it.
Awesome.
All right, thanks, Gloria. All right, you guys. I am extremely excited about our speaker today, who, you know, we have some lived experience. I mean, Kenny, obviously, through some of the work that we do, and you know, the work that, and I think I've mentioned this before. When I came to ArtCenter back in the '90s, I mean, I came to ArtCenter because the only thing I really wanted to do was design album covers. Right, because that was such a part of the environment that I grew up in with my family, and music was a big part of my lifestyle growing up, and it still is actually. But the work that I've done pales in comparison to the work that Kenny and his studio has done, and so I'm really, really excited in so many ways to have Kenny here, not just as, you know, a person who does amazing work in the entertainment space, but also as a fellow Black, you know, a designer. I mean, me and Kenny talk about this, the idea of, you know, when somebody say you're a Black designer, it's like, no, I'm a designer who happens to be Black or half African-American, depending on what you want to call it, right? But, you know, the idea that me and Kenny have talked about over the time that we've met each other is really trying to provide opportunities and get younger African-Americans and people of color into the design field and create opportunities as far as education, as well as opportunities to work after that. So we'll get into that a little bit later on, a little bit more, but more specifically, let me just introduce Kenny based on his bio. So Kenny was born and raised in East London. In 1987, he moved to New York City to pursue a career in graphic design. He quickly found his niche in the music industry, starting out in the art department at Def Jam Records, which some of you, I'm sure, hope you guys know. If you don't know Def Jam, check it out. He designed classic album packages for Public Enemy, LL Cool J, and Notorious B.I.G, to name a few. After successful years at Def Jam, Kenny moved to MCA Records in Los Angeles, where he quickly became vice president of creative services. Kenny, was Puff the in charge of MCA at that time?
No, at that time he had Bad Boy Records.
Oh, he had Bad Boy.
Yeah, that was the early '90s, and that's
okay.
where he worked on Ready to Die, like Biggie's.
I see. Okay. All right. Let me finish this up real quick. So in 2000, Kenny and his business partner Deanna launched Gravillis Inc, a boutique design agency behind dozens of iconic movie posters, including recent Oscar-winning films such as Free Solo, BlacKkKlansman, If Beale Street Could Talk, and Bohemian Rhapsody. In June 2018, Kenny became an official member of the Academy of Motion Picture and Sciences and Public Relations branch. Whoa, dope. I didn't know that, bruh. I want to be there. Besides film, he also loves all things football, as in soccer, guys, not American football.
Right.
Anyway, so without further ado, let me turn this over to my good friend, and in a lot of ways, somebody who I look up to in terms of the work that they've done, Kenny Gravillis.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that, Ty, Professor Ty. Yeah, guys. So glad to be here. Here at ArtCenter with art students. I did actually go to art school. I wasn't there for long, a couple of years, and I left. But yeah, I think art school is really important. I think it's, you know, a place where you get a chance to explore, you get a chance to sort of find your place in what you want to do. I think it's interesting. I feel like one of the big differences, even from maybe when I was going to art school, compared to now, is that I feel like you have way more chance now to actually guide your career. Well, I feel like back in the day, it was about finding a design job, you know? And I will start off with that. I actually moved to New York back before most of you were born. Well, I'm sure none of you were born in 1987 when I was in New York. But yeah, after school, I moved to New York and proceeded to get, I think I worked altogether in 2 years, I had 4 design jobs total. And I got fired from all 4 of them, basically. And, you know, so the interesting thing about that was all 4 of them were very much packaging design. It's not that I have anything against packaging design, it's just that particular packaging design, it was for a lot of supermarket type of goods. And I just remember, you know, it was like Mott's apple juice and there was like 100 yellows. And I just remember being so bored and so not interested. And I was just, and then it really hit me. It's like, wow, there's design, there's like so many different sort of parts of design. Like, and somebody has to do these different things. But like, I was just not passionate. So I feel like if you get nothing from this talk at all, the one thing you should get, hopefully, is find out actually what you're passionate about in design. Do you know what I mean? Like, because there's plenty of design that I realize that I'm not passionate about. You know, I'm not passionate about Mott's apple juice or, you know, like, you know, Kellogg's flakes packaging. Like, it's like there's certain things that just do not connect to you. But anyway, I was lucky enough to get an opportunity at, it was actually, I will tell the story very quickly and then I'll get into showing some stuff. So this actually really sort of locks into the idea of being passionate. So anyway, I somehow managed to get an interview at Sony Records. It was amazing. I couldn't believe it. The guy's name, he's still there, by the way, like 30 years later. His name is Christopher Osopchov. He's the head creative of Sony. And I was so excited to go because I was like, oh my goodness, this is a music job. I've hated all these packaging jobs and I really want to do albums. I really want to do albums. So somehow, by some miraculous miracle, I end up getting a meeting with him. So I go to the meeting and I show him basically what I've done, which is what, as I've just told you, Mott's apple juice, right? I have like basically all the things that I have done for this boring packaging stuff. So anyway, I show him the work. He looks at the work, and at the time, he gets another piece of artwork in. And don't forget, this is before computers. So this is actually a real piece of art that came in. So he's looking at the art, and he's like looking at my work, looking at the art, looking at my work. Then he starts to just flip over my work, but not look at it. And he's just looking at the art. Then he says to me very simply, he says, you realize we design album covers here? And I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. He's like, yeah, but there's nothing that you're showing me that lets me know that you want to design album covers. So I was just kind of like, oh my, I don't. He's like, I tell you what. He said, why don't you go design some album covers and come back to me? And I kid you not, that next 2 weeks of my life changed my life because I actually finally was doing something that I was actually passionate about. And it was pretty amazing. So anyway, but of course, it's life. I can't get another meeting with him. I've designed these covers and I cannot. He's in China, he's here, he's here. It showed it was a miraculous thing to get me in the first place. I cannot get a second meeting with him. So I end up, I was looking at one of my CDs and I saw on there Def Jam Records and I saw it was connected to Sony and I ended up going to meet with Def Jam. Now, believe it or not, when I went to Def Jam and I met with them, I showed them what I thought, again, was the professional thing to show them, which was the Mott's apple juice stuff. And same response. They were like, okay, thank you. Basically pushing me out the door. And I said, hold on 1 second. 1 second. I also have this. And then I showed them the covers that I had made to show the guy at Sony. And when they saw those covers, that is what actually got me the job. So that is how my career basically started in music. And the beautiful sort of round, sort of the 360 point of that is that 5 years later, when I was working at Def Jam, I went back to Sony and I actually decided that I got an offer the job, and I actually decided not to take it and actually took a job at MCA Records instead. So it was a nice little comeback. So all that to say, like, passion is really important. Like, you know, because you'll, like, when you become passionate about work and passionate about what you're doing, it's what drives you, and it's bigger than money. It's bigger than all things. It's like, you know, to have a career in design is really, it's a fortune. It really is. It's, you know, like, I don't take it for granted ever. And it's one of those things that if you can manage to navigate and have one, like, it really, you know, the fact that you're actually getting paid to be creative and to express yourself in that way is truly like an amazing thing. So that's my little spiel on just like design and why, you know, like, be passionate and stay passionate, please. That's the last thing you do. All right. Gravillis, pronounced Gravillis. It's our last name. Wasn't, yeah, like, when it came to like naming companies, I had no patience. I was just like, Gravillis, that'll work. So anyway, our logo, by the way, you're seeing the logo there briefly. Basically, it's my partner and I, this was our daughter at 9 months, and this is her hungry face. It's basically the face she made before she just completely lost her shit. And that was the hungry face. So we decided that was going to be a reminder for us as a company, like, to always stay hungry. Like, no matter what goes, no matter what happens, whether it's good or bad, we always have to stay hungry. And that's something that we've sort of, you know, continued on. So that's a little quick story of our logo. All right. So after being in the music industry, we started Gravillis creative agency in 2000, where we actually did still a ton of music. So this is a little ego thing real quick. You know, what does blah, 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 some people you might have heard of, what do they have in common? You know, they chose us. You know, we are really fortunate to work with really creative artists. And that has always been something for us that has been rewarding, and something that we've always tried to do is work with creative people in what we do. So that's a fun thing. So like we said in the beginning, it was album covers, you know, and like I said, we're really fortunate. We've worked with a lot of people, you know, with everywhere from the Roots to Santana to Common, you know, we did Ready to Die, like Biggie's first album. There's been a lot, you know, that we've done over the years, and we've loved album cover design. You know, there's so many experiences, there's so much depth and richness to it that
Hey, Kenny, can I just say really quickly, the Ready to Die album obviously is so iconic now, and things become iconic over time, obviously, right?
Sure.
So I mean, that in itself, from the standpoint of your studio, I'm sure, you know, that's one of the things that you guys look back and are really, really proud of.
Yeah, you know, so what's really funny about that, and a little quick shared story, if you guys look at Ready to Die and you look at the back cover of Ready to Die, you're going to see, you know, you guys are typography students, you're going to see this stretched type. And the reason why type is stretched is because this is the first project we did on an actual Mac. So it was like literally me like playing with type in like the worst ways on the back of that CD. So that's why, you know, you're like, oh my goodness, the type looks crazy on the back of that thing. That's because it was the very first cover that I ever worked on using a Mac. And my mind was so blown that you could do so many different things. So,
Yeah.
So there's there's that.
I actually talk, Kenny, I actually talk about, when the Mac first came out and how designers were using the Mac to stretch type. And it's like, you guys don't do that.
Don't do that. Exactly. Yeah, like no, literally on our website, it's like please don't stretch type ever.
Yeah, that was in the 90s. Okay, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, in the 90s we were stretching type all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm glad to say that we're past that now. So yeah, so in the beginning, this was our roots. The music was great, and it was, like I said, it was a very rich time. It was a very hanging out with artists, like listening to music. It's probably still one of my favorite design industries is like album cover design, just because while it's changed a lot, of course, over the years, but there's something really beautiful. For instance, like Common, he would have this thing where he would meet me and he would take me for a drive to listen to his album. And that's how all the projects would start. So he would just be in his car and we would just drive around, listen to the record, and he would just start to talk to me about sort of like what he's feeling and where he wants to go on the album. So it's just, there's something like so personal about album cover design I still really love. We don't do a lot of it often now, but it definitely holds a special place for me for sure. So anyway, so that was the beginning. That was, albums. So then we came to movies. Now, the thing is, you'd think that was an easy transition in terms of movies. You'd think it was like, oh yeah, okay, you did all these cool albums, let's just jump on cool movies now. But believe it or not, the movie industry is incredibly small. It's like a little club, and we were definitely not invited. And it took a long time for us to actually break into the TV film business. It's just one of those industries. It's almost like a cottage industry to itself. Like a lot of people almost don't really know much about it when you really think about it. You don't really hear much about it. It's just like you see a poster, you just sort of assume it comes from, the movie studio, but you don't realize that there are a bunch of agencies that are all competing, that it's like incredibly cutthroat. It's a real thing, and it's a real big industry. But it's another really fun one, in the sense of, dealing with filmmakers. We are fortunate enough to do all of Spike Lee's projects. And, so just the insight that we get with certain directors and certain films, it's really rewarding. So movies came next. Sort of where things are going with us right now, we're starting to get more into brands and brand work. People are brands now. We're just kind of trying to expand our business a little bit to speak to brands more, and it's fun. So that's sort of where we're going. I'll get into just sharing some of our work. I'll get through. We'll look at a few things. So this is actually something we did for Audible, called Sandman, which is for Amazon's Audible brand. And like we'll get projects like this where it's not just the poster, it ends up being like a bigger project. So with Sandman, like to give an example of our campaign development, this is just an example of how a project would work at Gravillis, something like this. We actually come up with 3 different sort of themes, and they'll end up picking a theme, and from there we'll continue and sort of develop that one theme. As you saw, we had Sand and Dust, the dreaming and pulled from your reality, and Sand and Dust was what was picked. And then from there we start actually developing. So this is how things look. So that you had sort of what we did for the main key art, and then there was all these characters. It's interesting with these projects, there's certain projects where you just make one poster. There's other projects like this where there's so many different assets. Not just stills, but also motion as well. So all this stuff was all made for all the social for Sandman. They kept going. I think altogether there was something like 500 assets complete for the whole project. And this was an actual trailer that we did where we had to do 3D. It was, it was a lot. And we don't even have, so with a project like this, we had to actually get freelancers to help, like people that knew Nuke and Flame and different like really high-end 3D programs. So yeah, it was like 500 deliverables. So it's huge. And something completely different. And this kind of gives you an example of just different directions that we've been going. Win Nightlife, we actually ended up doing a brand, a positioning for these guys where they had like 30 different DJs and they had to make it all feel like it was this sort of cohesive campaign. But they needed 30 different DJs and 30, and there's like 5 different clubs. So it became a real sort of branding scenario. As you see here, we had to come up with like a system of like how to like show all these different clubs with all these different DJs. So as you keep going, we came up with a residency video. And again, everything still needed to connect. So we had to, the video had to connect to the print, to the outdoor. And there's a special 10-year anniversary piece that sort of visually like moved from everything else. They wanted that separate. But in the end, you end up seeing all the sort of different parts that we end up having to do. So these are like sort of newer types of projects that we're getting into from our regular sort of TV film projects. So it's just like a little sense of, you know, some of the stuff we're going, where we're going a little bit more branding. Here's like focusing on, you know, one of our projects, like I was telling you, we do all Spike Lee stuff. And this is an example of just sort of how things work on a movie poster, for instance. So this was BlacKkKlansman. I ended up meeting with Spike at his hotel. He ended up, you know, telling me the story of this. You know, we'll read the scripts a lot of times, because a lot of times, you know, film's not done. So we'll read a script, and from the script is where we start to, we will meet with the studio, or in this case with Spike, and we actually start to develop kind of ideas. So this is a perfect example of the process. It's like, that's a tone and style that we actually received from Spike. And then we sort of get into sketches and concepts of like, okay, what do we want to shoot? You know, like what are the concepts, and all that has to go through like the film company, Spike. So there's a lot of people have to see it. A lot of people have to sign off. And then finally we'll end up doing a photo shoot with the, you know, in this case with, you know, JT. So yeah, John David. So yeah, so we end up doing a photo shoot, and then you get to see, here's an example on the left of just different versions. This, just so everyone knows, this is a small example. Like with TV film work, there are this is gonna sound insane, but sometimes it gets up to being like 400-500 different versions. Like, and for us, we're a smaller agency, but like, there's like 40 of us. Our competitors can go up to 600-700 different versions. I know that sounds insane, but just to give you a sense of the industry, it very much is a real thing. So here I've shown you like 9 different things. Even on this project, it was at least 150 different things, you know, before we ended up getting to the final posters. We end up doing social, and we end up doing a little motion piece as well. And we did outdoor, and even because it was Spike, we even did stuff that we don't even really love to do, which was for your consideration ads. So, and results, of course, was worldwide critical acclaim, a couple of clears for us, Oscar for Spike, you know, everyone happy. So yeah,
this is where the Spike won an Oscar for this, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, he did, exactly. That's why I was like, you know, results, you know,
yeah,
playing a couple of clears for us, Oscar for Spike.
Yeah, cool, good for you.
Yeah, so it was pretty happy. I'm gonna go to another kind of cool branding thing. This we did for the Geffen Playhouse. And see, this is nice when we get to do different things like this, which aren't in our typical sort of movie-esque wheelhouse. This was, but it's still entertainment, but it was for the Geffen Playhouse, and we needed to like design, basically it was 9 plays, and they need to feel like they were one thing. So obviously with the typography and just like the setup, we made that consistent, but obviously all the images were different and spoke to each of the plays. So this was kind of a fun thing. So we love having fun projects that sort of take us out of the comfort zone of doing film and television. So this was actually for World Planet Apes, and you know, like key art and social graphics. Like, you know, obviously social is such a huge thing now. What's the one great thing about social is it's allowed us to be more expressive and have different pieces of art. The tough thing about social, it's allowed us to be expressive and have different pieces of art. Just basically, it's like there's just more now, right? It's like there's so much more. And while that is great, sometimes it's also overwhelming. So it's sort of like it's the same good and bad problem, basically. But it does give you opportunities to do stuff. We'll continue. Our core strengths, of course, people know these are, posters like, I still, when I see a poster that we've done in the movie theaters, I still am like just excited by it. And I think if that goes away, I probably should stop doing it. So that'd be one thing I would say. It's like, if you're making work that you're seeing out there, and if that's no longer exciting you probably should definitely try something else. So like I said, I think we're in a very fortunate position, and we also work, and like this is something that that Ty brought up, being sort of, we're one of the very few Black-owned agencies that do what we do. Unfortunately, one of the things that we've worked really hard on is making sure we don't get pigeonholed, which is something that is really easy to happen, especially in Hollywood. And I think we've actually done a good job of not being pigeonholed, but it is an ongoing challenge. But like I said, I think we've worked it, we've navigated sort of the environment pretty well. So you get a chance to see sort of a different range of work that we do. So yeah, I feel like I think one of the challenging things and again the most fun things about movies and TV is that everything is so different. It's sort of like there's no, a lot of times we'll get young kids will come out of school and they'll show us a style of work. And what's interesting about that is that we're actually not looking for a style. We're actually looking for like how people think about projects more, because the style can only go but so long. It's kind of like, okay, well, if that's the style, like how long am I going to see that, and how often am I going to see that, and be wowed by that, right? Like of course there's like artists that this is what they do, but when you're talking about commercial work, like for clients, especially in the world of film and entertainment, like you need to be diverse in like how you approach things and how you approach projects. Like, say if there's like some cheesy comedy you have to work on, or some really deep, dark sort of art film. So it's just like you need to be able to have a range. So we're always looking for that. We deal with a lot of illustration. That's one beautiful thing about posters, is that illustration is not dead. It's an area that we have quite a few illustrators on staff. We have young people that basically started off in illustration in school that are now full-time with us working on different things. There's different sort of also careers when it comes to illustration, when it comes to posters, as you'll see. So
Kenny, let me ask you something. Can you go back to that for a second?
Sure.
So as far as illustration is concerned, I mean, the difference between using illustration and photography, when do you decide, whether an illustrative, as execution of something that's better than a photographic one?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So sometimes there's a very particular reason where it's like, oh, like it might be a situation where we don't even have photography, so we have to come up with, an illustration, or like, oh, we're trying to like mimic something from a certain time, and that was done in illustration style. But sometimes it's not, it's none of that. Sometimes it's like we just want a different approach.
Right.
Like I would say 90% of our projects, there's some illustration like option in there. Like once we're sending out the round, like I feel like for us at least, we're always doing that. So, right. Obviously this Ali Wong thing was based on the 50-foot woman old school, 50-foot woman old school poster. So there's things like that where, we're being very literal, but there's other things where, we're just like, oh, we're just trying something different. You know what I mean? And we do that a lot at Gravillis. So, a lot of people that like illustration kind of like what we do. This is an example of like how much sketch work is still used in entertainment. Like, so for instance, like, you know, we have a sketch artist on staff and they'll be sketching out ideas that we end up going to shoot. So the perfect one is Fault in Our Stars. You see that was a sketch that the client approved, and, you know, we shot it like pretty much almost verbatim of what that sketch was. And that doesn't happen often, where you actually use exactly what you sketched and you shoot it and that's exactly the poster. But occasionally it does, and that was one of the times that it did, which is awesome when it happens. But just to show you, it's a very real thing. It's like, people don't realize there's a whole career in being a sketch artist, for agencies like ourselves. It's a very real thing. We have like 2 of them on staff. It shows you just outdoor, you know, like that's another thing. It's great seeing your work, you know, all over the city. Again, doesn't get old. It's fun to see. One of the benefits, I think, of entertainment for sure, has been able to like just see your stuff out there.
Kenny, as you're showing that, can you just talk a little bit about like how, you know, content translates from the smaller screen and from that, you know, from seeing social media and things digitally into when things get really large as far as space is concerned?
Well, it's you know, as when things go smaller for social media, of course, it's like it's all about less is more. It's like less information, less type. You know, when you're dealing with the streamers, for instance, like a Netflix or Amazon or Apple, the stuff that you see when you're scrolling, you'll notice that, you know, it's very minimal what's on there. It's like an image and, you know, whatever the name of it is. So it's sort of like, I think outdoor, like when we're designing for outdoor, we're designing for like a different type of impact. You know, so for instance, like the Deadpool 2, those nails, that concept wouldn't necessarily be great in a little, you know, horizontal box on Netflix. Do you know what I mean? Like they might want to use seeing Ryan Reynolds' face for that, because, you know, like that's going to be something that people click on, versus outdoor, they want a different level of impact. So it really has changed a lot of things in regards to how we approach stuff. And like I said, before, back in the day, it used to be, oh, there's one piece of art and it works for everything. That is so no longer the case. You know, really no longer the case.
Got it.
You know, typography, logos, huge part of the business, you know, always will be of any design business. You know, the ability to, you know, sort of create feeling with typography and create mood, create vibe. It's a huge part of what we have to do with all the time. And unfortunately too, you know, it's, you know, what we do for a living, you know, it isn't a 2 and 2 is 4. Like, we can't prove to you it's right. And, you know, that's a big thing that you have to get used to right away when you're dealing with a commercial situation where you're working for a client. It's like, you know, subjectivity is everything when it comes to being creative. Like, you know, we win Clios, but I could show my mum, you know, whatever we won the Clio for, and she'll look at it and say, I don't get it. It's like, here's the reality. She's not wrong. You know, that's the problem. She's not wrong. She doesn't.
Hey, Kenny,
you know what I mean?
Kenny, you could ask our students. They would probably say some of their professors say the same thing. I don't get it.
Yeah. So, you know, it is, you know, it's so subjective, and it's part of the business that is definitely the most challenging, where it's like, oh, I went to school for this. Oh, you know, I've been trained for this. And then, you know, you feel like you have something that's so great that you show a client, and then the client's just like, no, I don't get it. You know,
Yeah.
like, it makes no sense to me, or like, what, that doesn't mean the same thing that you're saying. So it's, you know, it's always a challenge. And it's just part of sort of the designer burden, to be honest, like, at least in the more commercial way.
Right.
We'll skip through some of this stuff. It's hard to see this. This is all like just a bunch of social pieces that they actually move, but they don't hear. Copy is a huge thing in what we do as well, copywriting. it's it's something that a lot of you don't think about in design, but it's, copywriting is a huge part. It can change the way the ad feels by the right copy. It's huge. We came up with this whole Brad Pitt is a bastard thing and for Inglourious Bastards, and I remember that it was oh my goodness, is that gonna be offensive? And once Brad saw it, he laughed and thought it was great. So once he co-signed it, it was like, yep, we're good to go. We'll call everybody bastards from now on. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
For the rest of the movie. So it's sort of like it really can set the tone having the right copy. So that's a really huge part of it.
So Kenny, let me ask you something. Speaking of copywriting, so you hire a lot of copywriters in your studio as well.
Yeah.
I mean, are most of the projects that you guys work on, you guys actually write the copy as well, correct?
Yeah, 90%.
Okay.
We actually
Cool.
sometimes we actually change movie titles, believe it or not.
Really?
There'll be like sometimes there'll be a title and they'll be like, hey guys, can you do what they call title exploration, where we'll read the script and they want us to try to come up with new titles. So even that happens.
Wow.
Yeah, people don't realize like there's a lot that goes on to a film coming out just because
That's amazing that you can have that kind of influence on especially the movie industry, because it's so tight, you know what I mean, and hard to push those things through. But that's amazing that you guys actually done that.
Yeah, we've worked on that. Actually, look, going back to ComplexCon, we actually did a couple of booths a few years ago. So again, just something really completely different, and that was fun as well. I feel like the beautiful thing with entertainment is that it just travels. So there's a lot of various, like for instance, the Academy Awards, because we're friends with Common, he wanted to do he didn't like what they were coming up with, so we actually came up with an idea for his performance, and they ended up doing it.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's amazing, like design, the different ways it can sort of be expressed and showed up, and I think in the entertainment, the great thing about that is sometimes you'll get connected into things that you wouldn't normally do, like that whole sort of Academy Awards stage design thing that's
right.
Just wouldn't never.
Right, which is kind of cool, Kenny, because we were talking about this earlier, and I told you that I'm taking actually my grad Type 3 students this weekend to ComplexCon.
Right, exactly.
And so part of that is to get an idea of what immersive experiences using typography and imagery is all about, and how it articulates in a large room with competitors like right next to you. So
yeah, exactly.
was that more challenging for you guys?
Yeah, oh no, definitely. Oh my goodness, it was definitely more challenging. I mean, we had never done it before. So that was number one, it was that challenge. But number two is just sort of like, we had to work with different vendors that we'd never worked with before too, in terms of people that are building all this stuff. We used to work with illustrators and like I said, copywriters, and we're not used to working with builders and, like fabricators and different things. So,
yeah,
but no, really a lot of fun though. A lot of fun.
Cool.
Finally, a little bit about us, just our clients. We've been around again. This is our 22nd year in business. And we're still going, and sort of art will continue. This is something that is actually kind of moving along right now. Like we're very committed to trying to get more kids of color into design. And we are currently right now working on, I think it's okay to say that, it's a different school, but we're currently working on a program with, one of the streamers in a school that we're putting together that is going to be an opportunity for kids of color to really get into our industry and learn sort of what we do. So we're really excited about that. That's going to be starting in September.
Yeah, it's a competitor school, you guys, and he doesn't want to say the name, but it's like it's kind of called Otis, I think.
I didn't say that. But anyway, and that's our sort of ethos is stay hungry. So that's what I will leave you with.
Rock and roll. All right, Kenny, thank you so much, man. Kenny, I mean, obviously, with that history of coming out of, the record industry and doing album covers, and that story that you said about, about your first interview, right? I had a similar experience with Nancy Donald, who was at Sony Records, I
Oh
think.
yeah.
No, remember,
Yeah.
Nancy? So
Yeah, yeah.
when I came out of ArtCenter, I had my first interview with Nancy Donald, right?
Wow.
And she loved my work, and I was like, okay, here's my dream job: album covers, right?
Yeah.
Album covers. And she told me, after going through my portfolio, they had me there for like 3 hours.
Wow.
She was showing my work to all these art directors, and then she finally came back and said, we love your work. The problem is you just don't have any experience. And I was like, really? It's like, well, that's what I'm here for.
Exactly. Yeah, no, so true.
Anyway, so that led to me coming through and doing music work later on my own terms. But it's amazing that with that story. So can you, talk about the transition from music into what you guys are doing now with movies? Because most of your work is kind of focused on that, but I know what you're saying. You guys are expanding the work that you do now.
Right.
What is the greatest challenge, other than obviously you were talking about the challenge of being one of the few minority owned or Black owned firms that does the work that you guys do and especially in movies.
Right.
How do you navigate that landscape?
Well, it's interesting. So first of all, the huge difference between, say, music and film is, with music, it's very much more of a personal experience, in the sense of, if I'm working with Common, like I really just need Common to like the album cover, to be honest. Or I really need the Roots to like the album cover. It's like,
right.
Or whoever it is, right? I really need just that artist to be into what we're doing. When movies isn't like that. Movies is like, it's a whole machine that needs to agree and, and say, hey, because I always, it's like literally, it's like a bag of money that like they ring the bell on, that once they say this is the image, they ring that bell and this money starts to dissipate. So everyone is very nervous about movie marketing because of how much money is spent on this final image to put this out.
Right.
So there's a lot of second guessing. There's a lot of running up flagpoles. So it's just the process in itself is just way more complicated to get through than an album cover most of the time. So there's that challenge. But the other challenge is that it's a club. There's about 15 agencies that do everything. Like I would literally do 98% of the work. And it's very club, and that's what we're trying to break down. Is we're trying to change that sort of ethos and try to get just more diversity in that.
Right.
Because there's so much diverse content happening, but in regards to actual creatives, agencies or even executives, there's hardly anyone of color that is sort of taking the charge of putting creative to some of that work.
Sure.
So that's what we're trying.
So can you also talk about the types of talent that you guys look for in your studio?
Absolutely. And one of the reasons we're doing the program is because we really want to prepare people for the industry. I think one of the toughest things to do after you've been to a school like an Otis or an ArtCenter, whatever, is you come into an industry like ours and you're just not prepared, and that's just the reality. You're just not prepared. And it's like, there's nothing really that ArtCenter can do or Otis can do, because the industry itself is it's just quite a challenge to navigate. No, it's first of all, the actual timelines, it's all unreasonable. 90% of it is unreasonable. And if you're not used to it, you're sort of there is no take 5 weeks on a project, or that doesn't exist. It's just not the real world. So you have to and of course, when we're bringing in juniors, we're not expecting them to deliver that kind of that output, but it's important for them to be able to understand where they are and what it is. So I'm actually really proud of our internship program at Gravillis. There's an intern who was an intern 7 years ago, that I just sent to London to do a photo shoot, you know, with Idris Elba, you know, and he was an intern 7 years ago. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
and now he's a creative director, you know.
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
this.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
I'm proud of sort of like the growth, how we're able to grow young people.
Yeah. Okay. Let me get to a question that's actually in the chat from let's see, Tashika Arsenault Sutton. She asked, "Hey Kenny, I've been a fan of the work from your studio and Art Sims. Are there other Black designers working in the entertainment industry, especially from before you started, that you're familiar with, that maybe influenced you as well?"
Right. Yeah, it's hard, you know, like not so much in TV film. You know, I think in music there were a few. There seemed to be more people of color in music that were you know, different sort of album, different record companies. But I unfortunately I would say that there's been such a lack, especially in entertainment, of representation. It's been really hard to find people that have been doing this for a long time.
Right.
Yeah, my boss, Say Adams, is like one of the biggest sort of my mentors. He was my boss when I was at Def Jam, and he actually is one that gave me that opportunity when I showed him the covers that I did for Sony. He's the one that gave me the opportunity, and he's still working now as an artist. So he's a huge mentor. His name is Say Adams, and he ran a company called The Drawing Board, which was basically Def Jam's in-house art department. And that's who I worked for. So yeah, I would definitely say he would be the one for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I could imagine, you know, when you doing work for artists in music, how, you know, how vocal they are about what they want, right? I mean, because they've created the music, they've spent all their time and passion, you know, they're very passionate about the music and they want it to come off right. It's like, how do you like navigate, like, when you think they're being like, they're trying to dictate too much of the policy?
It's, you know what, that's a trust thing, you know. It's interesting. So like for instance with the Roots, my first meeting with them was to tell them that the label did not want to go with a cover that they wanted. That was my very first meeting with them back in like For Things Fall Apart. And what was interesting about that was they sort of knew the cover that they originally wanted really wasn't the best. And I pitched them this idea of like having archival photography for the cover. And they were like, yeah, let's see it. And then once we put it together, they end up loving it. And it ended up doing really well. And those covers got some attention. And after that, they like the level of trust they had in me had grown. And it just continues to go.
So it's about breaking down those barriers, right?
Breaking down the barriers and just sort of like, and it helps if you can do something that, of course, you know, like has some kind of effect, you know, that you can actually see. In that case, I was lucky.
Let me ask another question. This is from Aaron Estrada. He says, what would be the best type of work to show in your portfolio if you're interested in doing the kind of work you guys do? What would you look for in portfolios? So
first of all, like going back to what I was told back in the day, because now it's much easier to do it, like your versions, like your renditions of like, you know, what, like if you want to design movie posters or you design out, it's like, what would your version be of The Departed or of this film or that? Like, and I don't want it to see it looking like what's already out there. I want your expressive view. Because I mean that, like for me, like I look at like idea is everything for me. Like it's sort of like there's a level of course, execution that's massively important. But execution a lot of times is about doing over and over and practicing and getting good and understanding. That's what execution is, right? It's about, you know, understanding like the way something needs to look. But like ideas are still king though. It's like you still need a concept, still need an idea. And that's still like a huge thing for us. Even when we're looking at sort of portfolio, like we want to see the thinking behind it. You know, like it's like an important thing to us. We do when we have anyone that comes in, we do give them a design challenge of coming up with posters, but also like sort of why, you know, like we want to hear like why they've come up with this and like what, what's brought them to this solution.
Right. Let me ask, so Gloria had a question actually. Do your designs change when they are used in a diverse global market?
Yes, so it's interesting. I feel like we've had situations where when
I don't have an answer for that.
Oh,
Is there something?
That wasn't me, that was Siri.
I think Siri's trying to ask a question.
Siri is like getting involved. No, I feel like it sort of depends. Like, so like different, for instance, different celebrities play different in different countries. So like that comes up where it's sort of like, oh, and you've seen there's actually been racial things that have come up through that too, where it's been like all of a sudden, all the Black people that were on the poster when it went to Poland disappeared. Do you know what I mean? so it's like, I know, it's happened,
And I have to say, Kenny, of all the places, because they have a phenomenal history, of the Polish poster.
Polish posters, yeah, I know.
Yeah, in fact,
I should take that back. I'm not saying it went to Poland. That's an example. You know what I mean? I'm not saying they did. But.
Of being defiant. I think the question had to do with, a comprehension of the imagery.
Right.
And of the titling too, does it translate? You have to change the titles.
Yeah, the titles sometimes you have to actually change, you have to change the title. Sometimes there's actual it's not just even typographically in terms of obviously language, but the actual title itself changes as well. So it's just, so I think it happens a lot.
Well,
and I have to say that.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I was really impressed by the diversity of the letter forms, of the logo types that are being done by your group. I mean, do you have a select group of people that you work with, or it just varies, or are they in?
Yeah, no, it's just we have that's from basically both our teams. Like typography it's one of those things too. Like it's something Gravillis that we're always. Like one of the things that we have noticed about the TV film industry is it can be a little bit lazy when it comes to type. It's like, it's imagery and then type locked on. So we're trying to, shift that thinking, try to get people to really listen, where's the type going? Don't just show a full ass image, but where is it going?
Yeah, that's one of the things, Kenny, that I noticed, obviously teaching typography for so long here. And one of the strengths of our department or our school here, especially our graphic design department, is our typography and our courses that we teach. I mean, we have a rigorous typographic program here, right? And one of the things that I've always noticed in the film industry is that, it's like you guys are still using Trajan as a typeface.
I know. It's we banned it. Literally banned it. No, but it's a real thing. It's like I've seen other people's work where Trajan is still a thing, and it's just like how is it possible?
How many different ways can you change that around?
I think part of that, though, honestly, is there is there's an old schoolness, and that's why I said there's a clubness to the industry.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. That we really are trying to shift that. Like I said, it is ridiculous that. Where there's maybe 3 or 4 agencies that are owned by people of color or have diversity, and in 2022, and it's sort of it's kind of crazy when you think about it, but the industry is it's taking its time to open up, but it's starting to happen. Like I said, what we're doing with the streamer and coming up with this program is a big move in the right direction.
Yeah, I think that's also a reflection of the diversity of your agency and the other agencies, because I think maybe they're bringing a different aesthetic, into the titling, into the imagery. I mean, it's very obvious.
Yeah,
and I think
Kenny, go ahead.
That has to come with your experience of who you are as a designer.
Right. No, absolutely.
You're going to bring to the table.
Absolutely, and I feel like one of the things that we're talking about with the kids that we're about to start this program in next September, is while we want to teach them the industry and really get them ready for it, we don't want them to lose their voice and their tone. Right. Know what I mean? That's what's super important. That's what's super, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for their voice. And because that voice is a voice that has not been sort of amplified enough in the industry.
Right.
So
And I think, Kenny, for the work that you guys do, I mean, graphically, you're combining these elements of typography, photography, illustration, and then also, writing, right?
Sure.
All of those things come together, right?
Absolutely.
And so, yeah, and so, here the idea of voice and developing a narrative, right? Especially in the grad department. That's what I focus on in the grad department. It's like, creating something based on, your research, writing, narrative, and then execution, right?
Right.
And the voice that you set and actually to do and to do that. And I think you guys have you're showing a perfect example of what happens with all these different assets that you've done based on all the movies that you've done, how different they are, right? And the different voice that you've created, but how strong and iconic they become over a period of time.
Thank you for that. I mean, I will share one thing because I think it has some relevance to what we're speaking to. So we did this one poster for this movie. I hope you can see that.
Yeah. James Baldwin, my favorite.
Yeah, it's called I'm Not Your Negro. And this is one of my favorite posters that we worked on. There's a couple of reasons why. One was the studio was incredibly sensitive, and which I really appreciated. They came to us and it's like, Kenny, we have this documentary, I'll be honest with you, like we're not, it's called I'm Not Your Negro. It's, it's a little challenging for us. We really need your help on it. And like one of the things that I appreciated is that I think a lot of studios would have tried to downplay that. They would have tried to actually, go Trajan, like 10 point, and then like make it feel like it was prestigious. So like, let's make it 10-point Trajan, and I spoke to them and I was like, listen, it's James Baldwin. And, it needs to be really bold.
Yes.
And I need you guys not to be afraid of this title.
Right.
And, that was a very rare situation where the studio actually was like, we'll take your lead, which does not happen. And we're able to get away with, making the title pretty much almost the whole poster.
And some pretty good kerning. Wouldn't you say, Gloria, or no?
No, I have to say it's great. What I have to say though, Kenny, is that, it's a shame that you bring a certain amount of your background and they trust you because it's coming from a Black man. It's not coming from me.
Right.
How, to put it out there and say, I think you should say this, they would probably go, we don't know. What do you know? But they feel, I think, and Ty and I have talked about this, when you talk about using certain language, you have to have a certain amount of skin in the game, so to speak, not to be, but, who uses certain languages and why, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And it's Baldwin. You're absolutely right. It's James Baldwin. You cannot use, please, no one ever use Trajan again in your life. And that's every student who is out there listening.
Exactly.
Never. Anyway.
I mean,
for any project, by the way.
I agree with that. If you don't take anything away from this talk at all, take that away.
Take it away.
But yeah, no, absolutely. And like I said, though, I think, like I said, what impressed me about this particular studio was, because I'll be honest with you, there's been many times where I've said something not necessarily about that particular project, but different projects where, it hasn't been received, and it's sort of been kind of like, well, we're going to just do what we are safe with doing, kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? So it is a rarity, that where people are willing to say, I don't totally get it, and can you help me sort of understand? You know what I'm saying? Like, so to give you a perfect example, to give, just so you know, I've had situations. So that poster, we have a lobby here, and that poster, we change out the posters to whatever we've done more recently, but that poster actually stays. It's the one that stays, and it doesn't actually move when it comes in. We've had a client come in before, and actually look at it and be like, oh, wow, like, and been a little bit uncomfortable. And I've been like, well, yeah, that's what it is.
That's who we are, right?
You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, but imagine if that had been the client, you probably wouldn't have gotten away with that person.
Yeah,
True,
true that.
true.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because like now he's taking his own sort of what he's dealing with, and he's looking at it and saying, wow, that's making me uncomfortable. Yeah, but you know, so now I'm gonna like I don't want to make other people uncomfortable. So let me like
Right.
so that's
right.
what I'm saying. It's like, so that's what you're dealing with. And that's why the lack of diversity, the lack of inclusion hurts the industry more than it realizes.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely. But that's, but that's also in academia, truth be told.
Sure, sure.
Also in academia.
With that said, I hate to end this
Yeah,
conversation.
no, absolutely. Yeah, 2 and 4. We're right here.
Kenny and
Yes.
Ty, thank you both. This is being recorded and
Cool.
we'll be able to have this available probably on the HMC.
Oh, I didn't mean to say what I just said then.
We can edit it out. We'll edit out, okay? We'll edit everything out, Ty. Don't worry that you don't like. But don't be afraid.
Yeah.
You know, I've gotten myself in trouble here.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
So thank you again, and thank you everyone for participating and attending. I just really enjoyed your talk, Kenny, and it's wonderful. I hope that we can bring you here to ArtCenter, Ty, so
Yeah.
that you can do an in-house presentation and perhaps even a workshop on
Yeah.
what you do. So
Yes.
thank you both, and
Thanks
thank you
for having me,
everyone for
guys.
attending.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Kenny, we'll break bread soon, okay?
Thank you. All right, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so
Thanks a
much.
lot.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Okay.